The fever had taken hold 3 days ago, and now Delilah Anderson could barely lift her head from the hay-strewn floor of the Concord stage coach station in northern Texas, where she had collapsed. She had been traveling alone from San Antonio, trying to reach her aunt in Dallas, when the illness struck with a vengeance that left her trembling and weak. It was late spring in 1876, and the Texas heat made everything worse. Through her delirium, she saw a figure crouching beside her, felt rough but gentle hands touching her forehead, and heard a low voice speaking words she could not quite understand. When her vision cleared enough to focus, she found herself staring into the greenest eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a dusty brown hat. "Miss, can you hear me?" the man asked, his voice carrying genuine concern. "I am Nathan Turner. I work the cattle ranch just outside town. The station master sent for me when you collapsed. We need to get you somewhere you can rest properly." Delilah tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper. She managed only a whisper. "I am dying." Nathan's jaw tightened, and he shook his head firmly. "No, madam, you are not. Not if I have anything to say about it." He lifted her carefully, and she was dimly aware of being carried outside into blinding sunlight, then placed gently in a wagon. The journey that followed was a blur of pain and darkness, punctuated by moments of awareness where she felt cool cloths on her forehead and tasted water being carefully dripped between her lips. When she finally woke with some clarity, she found herself in a small but clean room. Sunlight streamed through a window with simple muslin curtains, and she could hear chickens clucking somewhere outside. Her body ached, but the terrible burning had subsided. As she turned her head, she saw Nathan sitting in a chair beside the bed, his hat on his knee, watching her with those remarkable green eyes. "Where am I?" she managed to ask, her voice hoarse but functioning. "My ranch." "Well, it is not much of a ranch really, just a small homestead. I have about 50 head of cattle and some horses. You have been here for 2 days. The doctor came yesterday. He said you had a bad fever, possibly from tainted water, but that it should break soon." Looks like he was right. Nathan stood and poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "Drink this slowly." Delilah accepted the cup with shaking hands. "You brought me to your home. What about my reputation? People will talk. Mrs. Henderson from town has been here the whole time, sleeping in the other room. She is a widow and respectable. Nobody will say anything improper." Nathan sat back down, looking uncomfortable. Besides, the station had nowhere suitable for a sick woman, and the hotel in Concord is not fit for anyone, let alone someone in your condition. "I cannot pay you," Delilah said quietly. "I have only a little money and I need it to reach my aunt." "I did not ask for payment." Nathan's voice was gentle but firm. "Common decency does not have a price, Miss Anderson." She studied him more carefully now that her head was clearer. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 27 or 28, with brown hair that needed cutting and a face that was handsome in a rugged, honest way. His clothes were worn but clean, and his hands showed the calluses of hard work. There was something solid about him, something trustworthy. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "My younger sister died 5 years ago when she got sick while traveling. Nobody would help her. They were afraid of catching whatever she had. By the time someone finally took pity and sent word to us, it was too late. I swore I would never turn away someone in need." His voice caught slightly. "I could not save Emma, but maybe I could save you." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "I am sorry about your sister. Me too." He stood up, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion in the room. "I will let Mrs. Henderson know you are awake. She will want to bring you some broth. You need to eat, build your strength back." Over the following days, Delilah slowly recovered under the watchful care of Mrs. Henderson and the quiet presence of Nathan. He would come in the mornings before heading out to work with the cattle, and again in the evenings, always polite, always respectful. But she noticed how his eyes would linger on her face, how he seemed to relax when he saw she was improving. Mrs. Henderson, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes, was less subtle. "That boy has not stopped worrying about you since he brought you here," she said one afternoon while helping Delilah sit up to eat. "In all the years I have known Nathan Turner, I have never seen him so concerned about anyone except his family." "He is just being kind," Delilah protested, though she felt warmth spread through her chest. "Oh, it started as kindness, I am sure," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing smile. "But the way he looks at you now, that is something more." Delilah was 22 years old and had never been married. She had come close once, to a banker's son in San Antonio, but he had broken off the engagement when her father lost everything in a bad business deal. The rejection had stung, not because she loved him particularly, but because it showed how shallow his affections had been. After her parents died within months of each other last year, she found herself alone with nothing but a distant aunt and a handful of coins. She had thought her life was essentially over, that she would become a spinster dependent on reluctant relatives. But now, looking at Nathan through the window as he worked in the corral with a young horse, she felt something stir inside her that she had not expected to feel again: hope. By the end of the first week, Delilah was strong enough to sit outside in a chair Nathan had carried out for her. She watched him work, fascinated by his patience with the animals and the quiet competence with which he managed the daily tasks of the homestead. He had a hired hand, a young man named Billy who was 19 and full of energy, but it was clear that Nathan did most of the important work himself. "You have a nice place here," Delilah said one evening when Nathan joined her on the porch after washing up for dinner. "It is not much, but it is mine. Well, it will be in 5 more years when I finish paying off the land." He sat down on the steps, looking out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. "I have plans to expand, maybe double the herd, build a better barn. There is good grazing land here and water from the creek. A man could build a real future here. It sounds like you have thought it through carefully." "I have had plenty of time to think," Nathan said. "When you work alone most of the day, you do a lot of thinking." He turned to look at her. "What about you, Miss Anderson? What were your plans before you got sick?" Delilah sighed. "I was going to live with my aunt in Dallas. She said she could find me work as a seamstress or perhaps a teacher if I could prove myself. I am educated. My father saw to that before we lost everything. I can read and write and do figures." "That is more than most can say out here," Nathan said. "We do not have a school in Concord yet, but the town keeps talking about starting one." "Maybe someday," Delilah said, though she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. She was getting stronger, which meant soon she would have to leave this peaceful place and face the harsh reality of her situation again. That night, after Mrs. Henderson had helped her prepare for bed and left to sleep in the other room, Delilah lay awake thinking about Nathan Turner. He was not what she had imagined for herself back when she was a naive girl dreaming of romance. He was not wealthy or particularly cultured. He did not quote poetry or dance at balls. But he was good, genuinely good, in a way that seemed increasingly rare. He worked hard, cared for his animals, treated her with respect, and carried a quiet sorrow for his lost sister that spoke of a deep capacity for love. She found herself wanting to stay, not just because she had nowhere else to go, but because she wanted to be here with him. The following morning, Delilah woke to find Nathan standing in the doorway looking distressed. "The doctor is here. He wanted to check on you one more time before he heads out to another patient." Dr. Raymond was an older man with wire spectacles and a brisk manner. He examined Delilah thoroughly, asking questions about her symptoms and how she was feeling. Finally, he nodded with satisfaction. "You are recovering well, young lady. Much better than I expected, to be honest. When I first saw you, I was not sure you would make it. Fevers like that can go either way." "I am dying," Delilah had whispered to Nathan that first day, and she had believed it. She had felt death hovering close, ready to claim her. "But you did not die," Dr. Raymond said firmly. "You are young and stronger than you thought. With continued rest and good food, you should make a full recovery. Another week or two, and you will be able to travel if you wish." After the doctor left, Nathan seemed preoccupied. He went about his chores with less focus than usual, and Delilah saw him stop several times to just stand and stare at nothing in particular. That evening, instead of joining her on the porch as had become their custom, he saddled his horse and rode out without a word. Mrs. Henderson noticed Delilah's distress. "Do not mind him, dear. Men get funny when they have important thinking to do. He will work it out." "What does he need to work out?" Delilah asked. "I expect he is trying to figure out how to ask you something without sounding like a fool," Mrs. Henderson said with a chuckle. "That boy has been alone too long. He has forgotten how to talk to a woman about anything important." Nathan did not return until after dark. Delilah heard his horse in the yard and the sound of him settling the animal for the night. She had been sitting in the main room, pretending to read a book by lamplight, but mostly just worrying. When he finally came inside, he looked tired and dusty, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Miss Anderson, could I speak with you for a moment?" he asked, removing his hat. "Of course." Delilah set down the book, her heart beginning to pound. Mrs. Henderson made herself scarce, disappearing into the kitchen with obvious deliberation. Nathan sat down across from Delilah, turning his hat in his hands. For a long moment he said nothing, and she could see him struggling with the words. "I am not good at talking," he finally said. "I spend most of my time with cattle and horses, and they do not require fancy speeches. But I need to say something to you, and I need to say it before I lose my nerve." "All right," Delilah said softly. "When I found you at that station, you were so sick I truly thought you might die. And for some reason that hit me hard, harder than it should have for a stranger. These past 2 weeks, watching you get better, talking with you, having you here, it has made me realize how empty this place has been. How empty I have been." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You said you were dying. You said that to me, and I said not if I had anything to say about it." "Well, you did not die. You are here, alive, getting stronger every day. And I am asking you, please do not leave." Delilah's breath caught. "Nathan, I do not understand what you are asking." "I am asking you to marry me," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know it is crazy. We have known each other for less than 3 weeks. I am not rich, and this is not an easy life. But I can provide for you, give you a home, treat you well. You would never want for anything I could give you. And maybe, if you stayed, you might come to care for me the way I am starting to care for you." Delilah felt tears spring to her eyes. "You want to marry me? A woman you barely know, who has nothing, who was on her way to be a burden to her relatives." "I want to marry you because when I look at you, I see my future," Nathan said simply. "I see mornings having coffee together and evenings watching the sunset from that porch. I see someone to talk to about the day, someone to plan with, someone to build this place with. I see a partner, a companion. Maybe eventually I see love, real love, not just the spark of it, but the full fire." "There is already a spark?" Delilah asked, her voice trembling. "For me, yes. Is there for you?" She thought about the way her heart lifted when she heard his voice, the way she looked forward to their conversations, the way she felt safe and valued in his presence. She thought about the alternative, going to her aunt and living as a dependent, always being reminded of her poverty and lack of prospects. But more than that, she thought about what she wanted, truly wanted, and realized that she wanted to stay here with this good, honest man who had saved her life and was now offering her a future. "Yes," she whispered, "there is a spark." Nathan's face transformed with a smile that made him look younger and even more handsome. "Then you will marry me. I will marry you," Delilah said, and suddenly she was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, Nathan Turner, I will marry you." He crossed the space between them and took her hands in his grip warm and solid. "I will make you happy," he said. "I swear I will try every day to make you happy." "I believe you," she said, and she did. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the kitchen with suspiciously good timing and a huge smile. "Well, it is about time. I was beginning to think I would have to knock your heads together. When is the wedding?" Nathan looked at Delilah. "As soon as you feel strong enough. I do not want to wait long, but I want you to be well." "The end of next week," Delilah suggested. "That will give us time to make arrangements and for me to regain my full strength." "The end of next week it is," Nathan agreed. The following days passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Henderson took it upon herself to organize everything, recruiting several women from Concord to help prepare for the wedding. They would marry at the small church in town, with the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through at just the right time. It seemed like providence. Delilah's strength continued to return, and with it came a growing excitement about her future. She and Nathan spent hours talking, getting to know each other properly. She learned that he was 28, had been working ranches since he was 14, and had saved for 6 years to buy this land. His parents were dead, both lost to illness, and his sister Emma had been his only remaining family. He was lonely, though he rarely admitted it, and he had all but given up on the idea of marriage until Delilah literally fell into his life. She told him about her childhood in San Antonio, about her father's business ventures that eventually failed, about her mother's gentle nature and her death from a broken heart after losing her husband. She told him about the banker's son who rejected her and how it had made her feel worthless. Nathan listened to it all and then took her hand and said, "That boy was a fool. You are worth more than all the money in Texas." The compliment, simple as it was, meant more to Delilah than all the flowery words her former fiancé had ever spoken. On the morning of the wedding, Delilah woke with butterflies in her stomach. Mrs. Henderson helped her dress in a simple but pretty dress of pale blue cotton that one of the town women had altered to fit her. It was not a traditional white wedding gown, but it was lovely, and when Delilah looked at herself in the small mirror, she felt beautiful. "You look perfect," Mrs. Henderson said, her eyes misty. "Nathan is a lucky man." "I think I am the lucky one," Delilah replied. The church in Concord was small, made of rough-hewn wood, with simple pews and a cross at the front. Most of the town had turned out for the wedding, curious about the young woman who had captured the heart of their quiet rancher. Delilah felt nervous as she walked down the short aisle, but then she saw Nathan waiting at the front, looking scrubbed clean in his best clothes, and all her nervousness melted away. His face lit up when he saw her, and she knew without a doubt that she was making the right choice. The ceremony was simple. The preacher spoke about commitment and partnership, about the challenges of building a life together on the frontier, and about the importance of faith and perseverance. When it came time for the vows, Nathan's voice was steady and sure as he promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life. Delilah's voice shook slightly, but her words were no less sincere. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. "Nathan, you may kiss your bride." Nathan leaned in, his eyes searching hers for permission, and then he kissed her gently, sweetly, a kiss full of promise and hope. The small congregation applauded, and Delilah felt tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. They had a small celebration afterward at the boarding house where Mrs. Henderson lived. Several of the townspeople brought food, and there was fiddle music and dancing. Delilah danced with Nathan for the first time, discovering that he was surprisingly graceful despite his claim to be rough around the edges. Holding her close, he whispered, "I cannot believe you are really my wife." "I cannot believe I almost died 2 weeks ago," Delilah whispered back. "And now here I am, married to you, starting a new life." "You did not die," Nathan said firmly. "You lived. And you are going to keep living for a very long time. We both are." As the sun set and the celebration wound down, Nathan helped Delilah into the wagon for the ride back to the ranch, their ranch now. The evening air was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and the distant call of night birds. Delilah leaned against Nathan's shoulder, feeling more content than she could remember feeling in years. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "I am happy." When they reached the ranch, Nathan carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests that she was perfectly capable of walking. "Humor me," he said with a grin. "I have been thinking about this all day." That night, lying in Nathan's arms in the bedroom that was now theirs, Delilah thought about how strange life was. 3 weeks ago, she had been alone and dying, certain that her story was over. Now she was married to a good man, had a home, and felt the first real stirrings of love growing in her heart. It seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale, but it was real. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan murmured in the darkness. "About how you married me when I told you I was dying," Delilah said. "About how you looked at me and decided I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving," Nathan said. "And you are going to live a long, long time. I can feel it. We are going to have years together, decades. We are going to build something real here." "I hope you are right," Delilah said. "I am right," Nathan said with conviction. "You will see." The first months of marriage were an adjustment for both of them. Delilah had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and hard work, the isolation and the challenges. But she also discovered that she loved it. She loved tending the vegetable garden she planted, loved learning to cook on the wood stove, loved the peaceful quiet of the evenings. Most of all, she loved being with Nathan, learning his moods and habits, discovering the man beneath the quiet exterior. Nathan, for his part, seemed to blossom with Delilah in his life. He smiled more, talked more, seemed lighter somehow. The loneliness that had shadowed him lifted, and he threw himself into improving the ranch with new energy. He built Delilah a chicken coop and bought her a dozen hens. He enlarged the vegetable garden and built a small smokehouse. He worked on fixing up the house, adding touches that made it more comfortable and homely. By late summer, Delilah realized she was completely in love with her husband. It had crept up on her gradually, a deepening of the initial spark into something warm and steady and strong. She loved the way he always kissed her forehead before leaving for work in the morning. She loved how he brought her wildflowers when he rode out to check the far pastures. She loved his laugh, his gentleness with the animals, his rough hands that could be so tender with her. One evening in September, as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out, she told him, "Nathan, I love you." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the lamplight from inside the house. "You do?" "I do, completely. I think I have for a while now, but I wanted to be sure. I am sure now." Nathan pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too, Delilah. I have loved you since the day you woke up and looked at me with those beautiful eyes, and I realized you were going to be all right. Maybe even before that." They kissed under the stars, A kiss that was deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. A kiss that celebrated not just desire but genuine love and commitment. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "I want to give you the world," Nathan said. "I want to make this ranch so successful that you never worry about anything. I want to fill this house with children and laughter. I want to grow old with you." "I want all of that too," Delilah said. "Every bit of it." As fall turned to winter, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. The cattle were doing well, and Nathan was able to sell several head at a good price, which he immediately invested back into the ranch. He bought more breeding stock and started making plans for a larger barn. Delilah continued to make the house a home, sewing curtains and tablecloths, making preserves from the garden vegetables, learning to be a rancher's wife. In December, Delilah realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She wanted a child, wanted Nathan's child, but the memory of her mother's difficult pregnancies and her own recent brush with death made her afraid. When she told Nathan, he swept her up in his arms, his face alight with happiness, but then immediately set her down carefully as if she might break. "Are you all right? How do you feel? Should you be resting?" he asked anxiously. "I am fine," Delilah assured him, laughing at his concern. "Women have babies all the time. I am healthy now, strong, everything will be fine." But Nathan worried. He insisted she do less heavy work, took over many of her chores himself, fussed over her constantly. Delilah found it both touching and occasionally annoying, but she understood. He had lost so many people he loved. The thought of losing her terrified him. "I am not going to die," she told him one night when she caught him watching her with a worried expression. "I promised you I would live a long time, remember? I intend to keep that promise." "You did not exactly promise," Nathan said. "I said it, and you said you hoped I was right." "Well, I am promising now," Delilah said firmly. "I am going to live to be an old woman. I am going to drive you crazy with my stubbornness and my opinions. You are going to get so tired of me." "Impossible," Nathan said, pulling her close. "I could never tire of you." The winter was harsh, with several heavy snowfalls that made travel to town difficult. Delilah and Nathan were snowed in for weeks at a time, but neither of them minded. They spent the long evenings by the fire, talking and planning for the future, dreaming about the baby that would arrive in the spring. Nathan read aloud from the few books they owned, and Delilah taught him some of the songs her mother had sung to her as a child. "You have a beautiful voice," Nathan said one evening after she finished a particularly lovely ballad. "My mother used to sing to me every night," Delilah said softly. "I want to do the same for our children." "Children?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "How many are you planning?" "As many as God blesses us with," Delilah said. "I want a full house, Nathan. I want noise and chaos and love everywhere." "That sounds perfect," Nathan said, his hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Absolutely perfect." As spring arrived and Delilah's pregnancy became more obvious, the women of Concord rallied around her. Mrs. Henderson visited often, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Other women from town stopped by with gifts and their own stories of childbirth, which ranged from reassuring to terrifying. Delilah listened to them all, storing away the information and trying not to focus on the scary parts. In late May, on a warm evening filled with the sound of frogs singing down by the creek, Delilah went into labor. Nathan rode like mad to fetch Dr. Raymond and Mrs. Henderson, then paced anxiously outside the bedroom while the women attended his wife. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Nathan thought he might go insane listening to Delilah's cries, feeling so helpless, remembering his promise that she would not die, Finally, in the late afternoon, he heard a new sound. A baby crying. Mrs. Henderson emerged a few minutes later, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy baby boy, and your wife is fine. Exhausted but fine." Nathan nearly collapsed with relief. When he was finally allowed into the room, he found Delilah propped up in bed, pale and sweaty but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with shining eyes. "Nathan, meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby's eyes were closed, and he had a shock of dark hair. Nathan felt something break open in his chest, a flood of love so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are both perfect. We should name him," Delilah said. "I was thinking James after your father." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. His father had been a good man who died too young. "James Nathan Turner," he said. "That is a strong name." "James it is," Delilah agreed. The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant work. James was a healthy baby but demanding, and Delilah was exhausted trying to care for him while recovering from childbirth. Nathan helped as much as he could, walking the floor with James at night when the baby would not sleep, changing diapers, doing whatever was needed. The ranch work suffered somewhat, but Nathan did not care. His family came first. By the time James was 6 months old, things had settled into a more manageable routine. Delilah had regained her strength and was back to doing most of her household work, with James usually nearby in a cradle Nathan had built. The baby was sweet-tempered for the most part, with Nathan's green eyes and Delilah's dark hair. "He is going to be handsome," Mrs. Henderson said during one of her visits. "He will break hearts someday." "Let's not rush him growing up," Delilah said, laughing. "I want to enjoy every moment of him being small." As James grew from baby to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Nathan's careful management and hard work paid off. The herd grew steadily, and he was able to hire another hand to help with the increased work. He also fulfilled his promise to expand, building the new barn and adding more fenced pasture. Money was still tight, but they were making it, building something solid and lasting. Delilah found her place not just as a rancher's wife, but as a member of the community. She helped organize a lending library in Concord, contributed to the church fundraisers, and assisted when neighbors fell ill or needed help. The town, which had initially been curious about the mysterious woman Nathan married so quickly, embraced her fully. She made genuine friends, women she could talk to and rely on. When James was 2 years old, Delilah became pregnant again. This time, she was less frightened. She knew what to expect, and her first pregnancy had gone well despite the difficulty of labor. Nathan still worried, but he hid it better, focusing on excitement rather than fear. Their daughter, Emma, was born in March of 1880, a beautiful baby with blonde hair and Nathan's features. Nathan cried when he held her, thinking of the sister he had lost and how much she would have loved being an aunt. Delilah held his hand and let him have his tears, understanding that this was healing for him, a way to honor Emma's memory while celebrating new life. "She would be so proud of you," Delilah said softly. "Your sister. She would be proud of the man you have become, the life you have built." "I hope so," Nathan said, looking down at tiny Emma sleeping peacefully in his arms. "I really hope so." Life continued its forward march. James grew into an energetic, curious boy who loved following his father around the ranch. Little Emma was quieter, more thoughtful, content to sit with her mother and watch the world. Nathan hired more help as the ranch expanded, until he had 3 full-time hands working for him. The house was improved and enlarged, with a proper second floor added that gave the children their own rooms and provided space for the growing family. In 1883, Delilah gave birth to another son, William. 2 years later came another daughter, Sarah. The house that Nathan had once worried was too quiet was now filled with the sound of children laughing, arguing, playing. Delilah thrived on the chaos, somehow managing to keep everyone fed, clothed, and loved while still maintaining the household and helping Nathan with ranch accounts and planning. The years passed, marked by the small and large milestones of family life. James's first day helping with the cattle roundup, his chest puffed with pride. Emma learning to read and teaching her younger siblings. William breaking his arm, falling from a tree and being stoic about it while tears ran down his face. Sarah's first steps, taken while reaching for her father. Christmas mornings with homemade gifts and stockings hung by the fireplace. Summer evenings with all of them on the porch, watching fireflies and telling stories. Through it all, Nathan and Delilah's love deepened. They had moved past the initial passion and romance into something richer and more complex, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine affection. They argued sometimes, of course. Nathan could be stubborn about ranch matters, and Delilah had strong opinions about how to raise the children and manage the household. But they always worked through their disagreements, always came back to the fundamental truth that they were on the same side, working toward the same dreams. "Do you remember when you told me you were dying?" Nathan asked one night in 1885 as they sat on the porch, a rare quiet moment with all the children asleep. "I remember," Delilah said. "I really thought I was. I felt death right there waiting for me." "And I married you anyway," Nathan said with a slight smile. "You did. You married a dying woman with nothing to offer you." "You had everything to offer me," Nathan corrected. "You just did not know it yet. Neither did I, really, but I knew I could not let you go. Best decision you ever made." Delilah teased. "Best decision I ever made," Nathan confirmed seriously. "Marrying you, bringing you here, building this life together. It has been the making of me, Delilah. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me live again." "We made each other live," Delilah said, taking his hand. "I was dead in all the ways that mattered when you found me. You gave me a reason to fight, to survive, to keep going. You gave me love and purpose and a family. You gave me everything." As the 1880s progressed, the ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Nathan's reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher spread, and he was often consulted by other ranchers about breeding stock and land management. The Turner name meant something now, carried weight. James, growing into a teenager, started taking on more responsibility, showing an aptitude for the work that made Nathan beam with pride. Emma proved to be brilliant with figures and helped her mother keep the ranch books, catching errors and suggesting ways to improve efficiency. William was the daredevil, always taking risks, but also fearless in defending his siblings and helping neighbors in need. Sarah, the youngest, was the peacemaker, the one who could diffuse arguments and bring harmony to the chaotic household. In 1890, tragedy struck when a flu epidemic swept through Concord. Many people fell ill, including several of the ranch hands. Nathan and Delilah worked tirelessly to care for the sick, bringing food and medicine to afflicted families, helping where they could. When Mrs. Henderson fell ill, Delilah nursed her for 2 weeks straight, barely sleeping, determined to save the woman who had been such a help to her all those years ago. Mrs. Henderson survived, but several others did not. The town buried 5 people that winter, including 2 children. The grief and loss affected everyone, but it also brought the community closer together. Nathan organized work parties to help the families who had lost breadwinners. Delilah started a fund to help with medical costs and living expenses. The Turners, once newcomers, were now pillars of the community, people others looked to in times of trouble. "You have done well," Dr. Raymond, now quite elderly, told Nathan one day after a town meeting about the epidemic. "Your family, your ranch, your standing in the community. Your parents would be proud." "Thank you," Nathan said, "but I could not have done any of it without Delilah." "That is a wise man talking," Dr. Raymond said with a chuckle, "recognizing that behind every successful man is a strong woman, in your case beside you, not behind." As the 19th century drew to a close, the Turner children grew toward adulthood. James, at 21, was a full partner in running the ranch, though Nathan was still very much in charge. He had started courting a young woman from town, a pretty girl named Margaret who was the daughter of the general store owner. Emma, at 19, was teaching at the school Concord had finally established, beloved by her students for her patience and enthusiasm. William, 17, was talking about joining the cavalry, much to Delilah's worry. Sarah, at 15, was still finding her way but showed an interest in medicine, inspired by Dr. Raymond's dedication during the epidemic. Nathan and Delilah, now in their 40s, watched their children with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness that their time as parents of young children was ending. Soon there would be grandchildren, a new generation to love and worry about. Where did the time go? Delilah asked one evening in 1899 as they celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. The children had conspired to give them the evening alone, taking care of everything so their parents could have peace. "I have no idea," Nathan admitted. "It feels like just yesterday I was carrying you in from that stagecoach station, terrified you were going to die in my arms. Now look at us. Gray in our hair, laugh lines around our eyes, 4 grown children." "Almost grown," Delilah corrected. "Sarah still has a few years to go. Close enough." Nathan reached across the table to take her hand. "You know what the amazing thing is? I love you more now than I did when we married. I did not think that was possible, but it is true." "I love you more too," Delilah said softly. "We have built such a beautiful life, Nathan. Not just the ranch or the house or the success, but the family, the love, the memories. It has been everything I never dared to dream of." "And you lived," Nathan said, his voice catching slightly. "You told me you were dying, and I married you anyway, and you lived. You lived and gave me 43 years so far." 43 years. Delilah looked confused for a moment. "We have been married 23 years. I am counting from when I found you," Nathan explained. "When you whispered you were dying, and I decided right then that I was going to save you, that you were going to be part of my life. That was the beginning for me." Tears filled Delilah's eyes. "You impossible romantic. Here I thought I married a simple cowboy, and you turn out to have the heart of a poet." "Only for you," Nathan said. "Only ever for you." The new century brought changes to Concord and the surrounding area. The railroad had finally arrived, connecting their corner of Texas to the wider world in ways that had not been possible before. The town grew, adding new businesses and amenities. The rough frontier life was giving way to something more settled, more civilized. For some, like Nathan, the changes were bittersweet. He had loved the wildness of the early days, the sense of carving something out of nothing. But he also appreciated the improvements, especially the better medical care and educational opportunities available for his children and grandchildren. Yes, grandchildren. James and Margaret married in 1901 and gave Nathan and Delilah their first grandchild, a boy named Nathan James Turner, in 1902. Holding his grandson, Nathan felt the same overwhelming love he had felt when holding his own children, mixed with a new layer of joy at seeing the family continue into another generation. Emma married a rancher from a neighboring spread in 1903, and William, despite his earlier talk of the cavalry, ended up marrying a girl from Dallas and settling nearby to run a freight business. Sarah surprised everyone by going to nursing school in San Antonio and becoming one of the first trained nurses in the region. As the years continued to pass, Nathan and Delilah transitioned into the role of grandparents and elder statesmen of the community. The ranch was primarily run by James now, though Nathan still weighed in on major decisions and helped with the work when his aging body allowed. He developed arthritis in his hands and knees, the price of decades of hard labor, but he rarely complained. Delilah, still energetic despite her years, threw herself into community work, organizing aid for the poor and helping establish a library building in Concord. They traveled occasionally, taking the train to visit Sarah in San Antonio or William in Fort Worth. They even made it to the Gulf Coast once, where Delilah saw the ocean for the first time and stood on the beach with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the beauty and vastness of it. "Happy?" Nathan asked, his arm around her waist as they watched the waves. "Incredibly happy," Delilah said. "Nathan, we have had such a good life, better than I could have imagined. When I think about how different things could have been if you had not been there that day, if you had not cared enough to help a dying stranger." "You were never a stranger," Nathan interrupted. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were meant to be part of my story. Call it fate or God's plan or just dumb luck, but I knew." "I am glad you knew," Delilah said, leaning into him. "I am so glad." The 1910s brought the challenges of aging more acutely. Nathan had a mild heart episode in 1912 that scared everyone, though he recovered well under Sarah's careful nursing. Delilah developed problems with her vision, needing spectacles for everything. But they adapted, adjusted, kept living fully even as their bodies reminded them they were not young anymore. Their children and grandchildren rallied around them, making sure they were cared for, that the ranch ran smoothly, that they wanted for nothing. It was a reversal of roles that Nathan and Delilah both found touching and slightly uncomfortable. They had been the caretakers for so long, being cared for took some adjustment, but there were still good days, beautiful days. Days when Nathan could still ride out to check the herd, Delilah beside him on her gentle mare. Days when the whole family gathered for Sunday dinner, the house bursting with 3 generations of Turners. Days when Nathan and Delilah sat on their porch as the sun set, holding hands, not needing words to communicate the depth of feeling between them. In 1916, Delilah turned 60. The family threw her a party that brought people from all over the county. There were speeches about her contributions to the community, her kindness, her strength. Delilah sat through it all with a bemused smile, occasionally looking at Nathan as if to say, "Can you believe this?" Nathan gave his own short speech at the end. "I am not good with words," he began, as he always did, "but I want to say something about my wife. 40 years ago, I found her sick and dying at a stagecoach station. She whispered to me that she was dying, and I married her anyway." He paused as laughter rippled through the crowd. "Best decision I ever made. She did not die. She lived. She gave me 40 more years, and they have been the best years of my life. She gave me children and grandchildren. She gave me love and partnership and purpose." Delilah Turner, you are the strongest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you did not die when you thought you would. Happy birthday, my love. The crowd erupted in applause, and Delilah stood to kiss her husband, not caring who was watching, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she said. "Thank you for saving my life." "Thank you for letting me," Nathan replied. The world kept turning, bringing with it the horrors of the Great War in Europe. William's eldest son enlisted, much to the family's terror, and spent 2 years overseas before returning home, changed but alive. The war seemed far away from their Texas ranch, but it touched them nonetheless through the boys who left and did not come back, the families who grieved, the sense that the world was shifting in ways that could not be undone. Through it all, Nathan and Delilah held on to each other and to the family they had built. They marked their 40th wedding anniversary in 1916 with another big celebration, this one even more joyous than Delilah's birthday. 40 years of marriage, 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren by then. The family tree had grown strong and wide, all stemming from a chance meeting at a stage-coach station and a cowboy's decision to save a dying woman. As the 1920s arrived, both Nathan and Delilah were slowing down considerably. Nathan was 72, Delilah 64. They spent more time resting, less time working. The ranch was entirely in James's hands now, though Nathan still offered advice when asked. They had moved into a smaller house on the property, leaving the main house to James and his growing family. But they were still close enough to be part of the daily life of the ranch. Dr. Raymond had passed away years ago, but there was a young doctor in Concord now who checked on them regularly. He marveled at their overall health, especially given the hard lives they had led. "Good genes and good love," he said. "That is the secret to longevity." Nathan and Delilah liked to sit on their porch as they had for decades, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build into something lasting. They talked about the old days sometimes, remembering the struggles and the triumphs, the sorrows and the joys. "Do you have any regrets?" Delilah asked one evening in 1924, a question that had been on her mind lately as she reflected on her life. Nathan thought for a long moment. "I regret that I did not get to see Emma grow up," he finally said, referring to his sister. "I regret the people we have lost along the way, the friends and family who did not get to live as long as we have. But regret about my choices, about the life we built? No, not a single one. No regrets," Delilah said firmly. "Even the hard parts were worth it because they led to this, to us, to the family we created. I would not change anything." In the winter of 1925, Nathan caught pneumonia. It started as a simple cold but developed into something more serious, settling deep in his lungs. The doctor came daily, and Sarah moved back home temporarily to help care for her father. The whole family held its breath, praying, hoping. Nathan fought the illness with the same stubborn determination he had brought to building the ranch. He was not ready to leave yet, he told Delilah. He had promised her years and years, and he meant to deliver. "You have already given me almost 50 years, Delilah said, sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. "That is more than I ever dreamed of." "Not enough," Nathan said weakly. "Want more. Want to see you turn 70, want to meet more great-grandchildren, want more sunsets with you." "Then fight," Delilah said. "Fight like you fought for everything else in your life. Fight for more time with me." And he did. Slowly, painfully, Nathan recovered from the pneumonia. It took months for him to regain his strength, and he was never quite as robust afterward. But he lived. He got his wish to see more grandchildren born, to celebrate more anniversaries, to have more quiet evenings with his wife. In 1926, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The celebration was smaller than previous ones, held at the ranch with just family, but it was perfect. All four of their children were there with their families. The house overflowed with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. 3 generations of Turners gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. James gave a toast. "To my parents, who taught us what love looks like, what commitment means, what it takes to build something lasting. Dad, you married Mom when she thought she was dying, and here we are 50 years later, surrounded by the life you built together. That is a legacy to be proud of." Nathan and Delilah held hands, both of them crying openly as their family cheered and celebrated. Looking around at all the faces, seeing the love and happiness, feeling the strength of the bonds they had forged, they knew their lives had mattered. They had made a difference, not just to each other but to all these people who existed because they had found each other and chosen love. The following years were gentler, slower. Nathan and Delilah spent their days in peaceful routine, enjoying the simple pleasures of each other's company. They read together, played cards, reminisced. Family visited constantly, bringing news and laughter. They were loved, cherished, honored. In 1930, Delilah turned 74. She was frailer now, her movements slower, but her mind was still sharp and her spirit undimmed. Nathan, at 78, was declining more noticeably. His heart was weak, his breathing labored at times. They both knew their time was growing short, but neither spoke of it. They focused instead on gratitude for the time they had been given, for the miracle of their life together. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness, Nathan said, "I have been thinking about that day at the stage-coach station." "You think about it a lot," Delilah said with a gentle smile. "I do," Nathan admitted. "Because it was the day everything changed. The day I found my purpose, my future, my love. You whispered that you were dying and something in me just refused to accept it. I decided right then that you were going to live, that I would make sure of it." "And you did," Delilah said. "You saved my life in every possible way." "We saved each other," Nathan corrected. "I was dying too in my own way, dying of loneliness and purposelessness. You gave me a reason to live fully, to build something meaningful. We were both dying until we found each other." "And then we lived," Delilah said softly. "We lived so much, so fully. We did not waste a single moment of the gift we were given." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, listening to the sounds of the Texas night around them. In the main house, they could hear the sounds of family, grandchildren playing, adults talking. The ranch that Nathan had started alone was now a thriving enterprise supporting multiple families. The legacy they were leaving was not just property but love, values, and connection. No regrets. Nathan asked, echoing the conversation they had years ago. "No regrets," Delilah confirmed. "Only gratitude." As autumn arrived, Nathan's health began to fail more seriously. He spent more days in bed than up, though he still insisted on sitting on the porch when the weather was good. Delilah rarely left his side, content to spend whatever time remained together. The family rallied around them, making sure they were comfortable, that their needs were met. On a crisp October morning in 1930, with Delilah beside him holding his hand and all four of their children gathered around, Nathan took his last breath. He was 78 years old and had lived a full, meaningful life. His last words were, "Thank you for living. Thank you for loving me." Delilah felt her heart break, even as she understood that this was the natural order of things. They had been blessed with 54 years together, far more than anyone could have predicted that day at the stage-coach station. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "Thank you for marrying me anyway." The funeral was well attended, with people coming from all over the county to pay respects to a man who had been a pillar of the community and a loving husband and father. Delilah sat through it with dry eyes and a straight back, drawing strength from her children, and the knowledge that Nathan would not want her to fall apart. The months after Nathan's death were difficult. Delilah had never been alone as an adult. She had gone from her parents' home to Nathan's. Learning to exist without him was painful and strange. But she was surrounded by family who loved her and needed her. She found purpose in spending time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in helping wherever she could, in honoring Nathan's memory, by continuing to live fully. The years continued to pass. Delilah remained active and engaged despite her age. She saw more grandchildren marry, more great-grandchildren born. She watched the ranch continue to prosper under James's leadership and eventually under the partnership of James and his sons. The Turner name was respected throughout the region, synonymous with integrity and hard work. In 1936, 60 years after that fateful meeting at the stagecoach station, Delilah sat on the porch of the small house she had shared with Nathan, now living there alone. She was 80 years old and feeling her age, but she was still present, still engaged with life. A great-great-grandchild had been born just last week, a baby girl with Delilah's dark hair and Nathan's green eyes. The miracle of it, the continuation of the family line, filled her with wonder. Sarah, now a distinguished nurse in her 50s, visited that afternoon. She sat with her mother and they talked about everything and nothing the way mothers and daughters do. "You miss Dad?" Sarah asked at one point. "Every single day," Delilah said, "but I also feel him with me. In this house, on this land, in all of you children and grandchildren, he is everywhere." "He saved your life," Sarah said. "That is what everyone says, that you were dying and he saved you." "We saved each other," Delilah corrected, just as Nathan always had. "I was dying, yes. But so was he, just in a different way. We gave each other reasons to live, and then we did. We lived fully and well and loved each other through it all. That is what I want you to remember, Sarah. That is the real story. Not that I was dying and your father saved me, but that we chose each other and chose life and chose love. We chose to build something beautiful together." "That is a good story," Sarah said softly. "It is the best story," Delilah said. "And it is all true." Delilah lived 6 more years after Nathan's death. In that time, she saw 2 more great-grandchildren born, attended countless family gatherings, and remained a beloved matriarch of the Turner clan. She never remarried, never even considered it. Nathan had been her one great love, and she was content to spend her remaining years honoring that love by living the way they had always lived together, with purpose, with kindness, with attention to family and community. On a warm spring evening in 1942, Delilah passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 86 years old. The entire town of Concord and most of the county turned out for her funeral. The preacher spoke of her contributions to the community, her strength, her kindness. But it was James, her eldest son, now a white-haired man of 62, who gave the eulogy that truly captured who she was. "My mother was dying," he said, his voice strong despite his tears. "That is what she told my father the day he found her. She was sick and alone and certain her life was over. But Dad refused to accept it. He saved her life, yes, but she also saved his. They saved each other, and then they built something remarkable. A family, a ranch, a legacy of love that continues through all of us standing here today." Mom lived 66 years after that day at the stagecoach station. 66 years of a life she thought was over. And she lived every single one of those years fully, with love and purpose and joy. That is what I want us all to remember. Not that she almost died, but that she lived. She lived so much, loved so deeply, and left us all better for having known her. Delilah was buried beside Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch. Their headstone was simple: Nathan Turner, 1852–1930, and Delilah Turner, 1856–1942, beloved forever together. But the real monument to their life was not the stone marker, but the thriving family that continued their legacy, the ranch that still prospered, the community that remembered them with love and respect. The story of the dying woman and the cowboy who married her anyway became family legend, passed down through the generations. Great-grandchildren who never met Nathan and Delilah heard about how they found each other, how they built a life from nothing, how their love story started with whispered words in a stage coach station and ended only with death 66 years later. It became a touchstone, a reminder that love is not just about the good times but about choosing someone and standing by that choice, about saving each other in all the ways that matter. The ranch stayed in the Turner family for generations, a testament to what Nathan and Delilah built together. The main house was eventually turned into a family museum of sorts, with photographs and artifacts from their life displayed lovingly. Young Turner descendants learned their family history by walking through those rooms, seeing the simple furniture Nathan had built, the quilts Delilah had sewn, the family Bible where all the births and deaths were recorded in careful handwriting. The story continued to inspire. When young people in the family faced challenges or doubts, elders would remind them, "Remember Nathan and Delilah. She thought she was dying, but she lived 40 more years because he refused to give up on her. We do not give up. We fight. We choose love. We build something lasting." It became more than just a story. It became a value system, a way of approaching life. In 1976, 100 years after Nathan and Delilah met, the family held a reunion at the ranch. More than 200 descendants gathered, spanning 6 generations. They shared stories, looked at old photographs, and celebrated the legacy of love and perseverance that started with a dying woman and a cowboy who refused to let her die. Someone had done the math. From that one marriage, blessed by chance and choice, had come 4 children, 11 grandchildren, 31 great-grandchildren, and dozens of great-great-grandchildren and beyond. The family tree was vast and still growing, all because Nathan Turner had found Delilah Anderson at a stage coach station in 1876 and decided her life was worth saving. As the sun set over the ranch that evening during the reunion, the family gathered on the hill where Nathan and Delilah were buried. The youngest generation, children who had never known their ancestors but carried their blood and their legacy, placed wildflowers on the grave. An elderly woman, one of the last of Delilah's grandchildren, now in her 80s herself, spoke to the gathered family. "I remember Grandma Delilah," she said, her voice wavering but clear. "I was just a child, but I remember how she would hold my hand and tell me stories. She told me about the day she met Grandpa Nathan, how sick she was, how certain she was that she would die. She told me that Grandpa looked at her and said, 'Not if I have anything to say about it.' And then he married her and brought her here and loved her for the rest of his life. She said it taught her that we never know what the future holds, that the moment we think everything is over might be the moment before everything truly begins. She lived 40 more years after whispering that she was dying. 40 years with the man she loved, building this family, creating this legacy. When I am afraid or when things seem impossible, I think about Grandma Delilah and how she lived when she thought she would die. It gives me courage. I hope it gives you courage too." The family stood in silence for a moment, honoring the memory of the couple who had started it all. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, they sang old hymns that Nathan and Delilah had loved, their voices carrying across the ranch land that had been won through hard work and sustained through love. It was a moment of perfect peace and perfect continuity, past and present and future, all connected through the bonds of family. The story of Nathan and Delilah Turner was never written down in any formal way, never published or widely known outside their family and community. But it lived on, passed from generation to generation, a treasured piece of family history that shaped how the Turners saw themselves and the world. It was a story about more than just romance or survival. It was about the power of choosing hope when despair seemed reasonable, about the strength that comes from partnership, about building something lasting in a temporary world. Years turned to decades, and the ranch eventually passed out of the family's hands, sold when the economics of small-scale ranching became too difficult. The house was preserved, though, turned into a local historical site that told the story of frontier life in northern Texas. Visitors could walk through the rooms where Nathan and Delilah had lived and loved, could see the porch where they had sat watching sunsets for decades, could visit their graves on the hill. A small plaque told their story in brief: how she was dying, how he married her anyway, how she lived 40 more years. It was a condensed version, lacking the richness and depth of the real story, but it captured the essence of their remarkable love. The land that Nathan had worked so hard to tame and cultivate continued on, passing through various hands, but always carrying the echo of the Turner legacy. Trees they had planted still grew, marking the boundaries of what had once been their homestead. The creek still flowed, providing water as it had for over a century. The land remembered them, even when human memory faded, but the real legacy was not in the land or the house or even the family name. It was in the values they had modeled and passed down: hard work, devotion, perseverance, love. It was in the way their descendants approached life, with the understanding that circumstances could change, that death did not always come when expected, that choosing hope and love could transform everything. The story came full circle in a way when one of Delilah's great-great-great-granddaughters, a young woman in her 20s, faced a serious illness in the modern era. As she underwent treatment, frightened and uncertain, her grandmother told her the story of Nathan and Delilah, about how Delilah had whispered she was dying, and Nathan had refused to accept it, about how Delilah had lived 40 more years, had built a beautiful life from the ashes of despair. The young woman drew strength from the story, from knowing that her ancestor had faced death and won, had chosen to fight when it would have been easier to give up. She survived her illness and went on to live a full life, always carrying the story of Nathan and Delilah with her, another generation inspired by love that refused to surrender. And so the story continued, rippling forward through time, changing lives, inspiring hope. Nathan and Delilah Turner, the cowboy and the dying woman who lived 40 more years, became more than just people who once existed. They became a symbol, a reminder, a light in the darkness. Their love story, beginning in a dusty stage-coach station in northern Texas in 1876 and spanning decades of joy and struggle, became eternal in the way that the best love stories always do. They had lived. They had loved. They had built something beautiful that lasted far beyond their own lives. And in the end, that was everything that mattered. The story that began with "I am dying" became a testament to life in all its fullness, to the power of love to transform, to the miracle of two people finding each other at just the right moment and choosing to build a future together despite all the reasons they might have walked away. Nathan and Delilah Turner's story was complete, a circle closed, a life well lived. From dying to thriving, from strangers to soulmates, from nothing to everything that matters. It was a story for the ages, simple in its telling but profound in its meaning. A cowboy found a dying woman. He married her anyway, and she lived 40 more years. Together, they created something beautiful.